Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into some deeply moving historical source texts that detail literally one of the most heartbreaking yet pivotal events in Islamic history. We're talking about the tragedy of Karbala. The accounts we're looking at meticulously record the history, the profound heartbreak, and ultimately the incredible sacrifice of Hazrat Imam Hussain. So my goal right now is to guide you through these sources, zeroing in on the raw facts and the truly profound historical narrative they lay out for us. Now, according to the texts, this wasn't just a sudden, unexpected clash. It was actually foretold. In an incredibly powerful dream, Nabi Paksa envisioned his beloved grandson, covered in blood, slain on the land of Karbala while suffering from severe thirst. Knowing this up front really frames everything we're about to talk about. It wasn't just a political skirmish, it was a profound, destined sacrifice that still echoes through history today. Section 1. Refusal of the Allegiance, the Succession Crisis of 60 AH. To really understand how we get to Karbala, our sources say we need to rewind a bit and start in Medina during the succession crisis of 60 AH. So following the death of Muawiyah, his son Yazid suddenly assumes power and demands absolute obedience from everyone. But there's a huge catch here. A prior peace treaty between Muawiyah and Hassan, who was Imam Hussein's older brother, had some very explicit conditions. It clearly stated that Muawiyah could not just nominate the next Khalifa. That decision was supposed to be left up to a shura committee, or the leadership was supposed to revert back to Hassan. So the sources really highlight how Yazid's sudden power grab was a blatant violation of a signed agreement. Because of this tension, the governor of Medina actually summons Hazrat Imam Hussain in the dead of night. His goal? To secretly force a pledge of loyalty to Yazid. But Imam Hussein's response is absolutely legendary. He basically says, "I do not see that my pledge of allegiance to Yazid in private would be sufficient. Wouldn't you prefer me to give it in public so that people are aware?" He point-blank refuses to legitimize a totally unjust rule in the shadows. And honestly, this courageous, principled refusal, it's the spark that sets the rest of this entire history into motion. Moving on to Section 2, the call from Kufa, seeking a righteous leader. Realizing things in Medina were getting incredibly dangerous, Imam Hussain and his family, the Ahle RA, decided to migrate to Mecca for safety. And once they get there, something crazy happens. A massive flood of desperate letters starts pouring in from Kufa, a major city over in Iraq. The people there were literally pleading with him. They wrote, "There is no imam over us. Therefore come, through you, may your God unite us under truth." They were promising thousands upon thousands of loyal supporters if Imam Hussain would just make the journey to Iraq and lead them. Which brings us to Section 3, Muslim bin Aqil's mission, assessing the loyalty of Kufa. Now, Imam Hussain was smart. He knew that uprooting his entire family and crossing the desert based on a pile of letters was incredibly risky. So he decides to play it safe and dispatches his highly trusted cousin, Muslim bin Aqil, on a recon mission to verify if Kufa was actually ready. And at first, the mission looks like a total overwhelming success. Thousands of Kufans eagerly welcome him and solemnly swear their allegiance to the Imam. Believing the city was totally secure, Muslim bin Aqil writes a letter back to Imam Hussain, giving him the green light to travel. It was a moment of immense, but as we'll see, tragically false hope. Section 4. The betrayal in Kufa. Fear overpowers faith. Word of this massive support gets back to Yazid, and man, his retaliation is swift and brutal. To lock down Iraq, he immediately appoints a notoriously ruthless new governor named Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. The very first thing Ziyad does is systematically hunt down, arrest, and threaten the key tribal leaders of Kufa. And here is where the story takes a staggering turn. The intimidation works perfectly. Just out of sheer panic and fear, the people of Kufa completely abandoned Muslim bin Aqil overnight. Left entirely alone by the thousands who had just promised him their lives, Muslim bin Aqil is brutally martyred. And what makes this timeline so agonizing to read about is that right before his martyrdom, Muslim bin Aqil actually managed to send one final desperate message. He was trying to warn Hazrat Imam Hussain to turn back because the Kufans had totally betrayed them. But tragically, the historical sources point out that this final warning just didn't reach Imam Hussain in time to stop his journey. Section 5. The Journey to Karbala, a fateful path to the Euphrates. So, completely unaware of the horrific betrayal that had literally just happened, Imam Hussain is already marching toward Iraq with his family and closest companions. Let's quickly anchor ourselves with the timeline here. They migrated from Medina to Mecca back in Rajab of 60 AH. Then, on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, they left Makkah for Kufa. But by the 2nd of Muharram, 61 AH, they are intercepted by Yazid's massive forces and forced to halt at the barren, desolate plains of Karbala. And this sets the stage directly for the catastrophic day of Ashura on the 10th of Muharram.
Section 6. The Final Stand, the 10th of Muharram.
Now they're trapped on the desert plains, and the historical accounts highlight a military mismatch that is just hard to wrap your head around. On one side, you have Hazrat Imam Hussein's camp. We're talking about approximately 72 loyal companions, which primarily consisted of members of the Hur bin Yazeed RA, along with women and children. On the other side, Yazid's army, 4,000 heavily armed soldiers led by Umar ibn Saad. Just to put that into perspective, the military disparity is mind-boggling, and it really emphasizes the unbelievable, unwavering bravery of the Prophet's household in the face of impossible odds.
And as if the numbers weren't bad enough, the opposing army decides to implement a total blockade. Starting on the 7th of Muharram, Yazid's massive army completely cuts off Imam Hussein's tiny camp from the Euphrates River. I mean, just imagine the sweltering desert heat and the sheer agonizing cruelty of deliberately depriving women, young children, and even infants of water for days on end. Yet, even with this incredible cruelty going on, Imam Hussein still tries to prevent bloodshed right up to the very last minute. On the morning of Ashura, he actually delivers a speech to the opposing army. He pleads with them, saying, "We didn't come here to fight nor to seize Yazid's power. Let me with my companions and family members go back to Medina or any Islamic border." It was a completely peaceful off-ramp. But the sources note that this offer was stubbornly, flatly denied. Yazid's army demanded absolute submission or nothing. 72. That number is so important. You see, the night before the battle, Imam Hussein actually gave his companions full permission to flee into the darkness. He told them, "Look, the enemy only wants me. Save yourselves." But you know what? Those 72 individuals absolutely refused to leave. Every single one of them consciously chose certain death over abandoning their imam when he needed them most. The historical accounts of the actual battle are just devastating to read. Hazrat Imam Hussein fought valiantly to the very end against those overwhelming odds. The texts strictly record that his body endured a staggering 34 sword and 33 spear wounds. He absolutely, fundamentally refused to submit to tyranny, ultimately making the ultimate sacrifice for his deepest principles. And as he finally fell, the sources recount his heartbreaking final supplication. Raising his bleeding hands up to the heavens, he prayed this intense plea for justice, asking the Almighty to hold his oppressors fully accountable for what they had done on that desert plain. Yet somehow, amidst all of that total destruction, the blessed lineage miraculously survived. The only male heir present to survive the massacre was Zain al-Abedeen, Imam Hussein's son. And the only reason he survived was because he was severely ill with a high fever, confined to his tent, and physically unable to participate in the battle. It's truly miraculous. So, as we reflect on all these historical texts, we're really left with a massive, deeply troubling question. How did thousands of letters and fervent promises of support from the people of Kufa turn into history's most heartbreaking betrayal? The contrast between those hopeful letters and the desolate, blood-soaked sands of Karbala is just staggering to contemplate. Ultimately, what you should really take away from this explainer is the profound, eternal lesson documented in these sources. The tragedy of Karbala shows us that fighting for an eternal, righteous cause is vastly greater than just bowing down to worldly power and tyranny. It leaves behind this incredible spiritual legacy of truth, sacrifice, and steadfastness, which kind of leaves us to wonder, if history eternally remembers the 72 who stood firm over the thousands who fled out of fear, what kind of legacy are we choosing to leave behind in the face of our own modern trials?